Alright, so we've got converting out of the way over a couple of lessons, and now it's time to start actually measuring some stuff. So today's going to be a nice, again, gentle introduction for you, right? We're still feeling the pain of 5 weeks of algebra, so we're just taking it easy on you this week. We're doing just some basic perimeter today, and then we're doing area, but only of squares, rectangles, and triangles, just the basic shapes, just to make sure you guys remember them and can apply them to your harder work that's coming down the track. So when we're working with perimeter, it's just really important to remember that perimeter is a measurement of the outside. So we're adding up all the sides of our shape. So to be able to do that, you just have to know how big all the sides are. So there's going to be a couple of little tricky ones for you today because they're not going to just label every single side for you. You'll have to go through and try and label as many sides as you can on your work, and then just add them up at the end. Right, and some of the methods they'll use to do this, they'll use these little marks here that we've seen before when working with triangles and other shapes that if they mark two sides with the same symbol, that means they're the same size. So for this first one, if that's 18, this is 18 as well. So to find the perimeter, we'll just be going 18 plus 12. And that will give us 48 centimeters for our answer, right? Really important you put your units in so we know what it's all measured in. So for the next one, there's lots and lots of different sides. We're going to make sure we add them all up, but there's going to be a fair few that we can't see. So you just have to use some logic and have a good close look at your diagram to figure out how long the sides are that you don't know. And you can't assume that just because one side looks like another one, it is the same. What we really have to be doing is going through and marking them all in, right? So uh, where we start is we start by looking here. We don't know how big this one is. So what we do know is that on this side we have an entire height kind of thing of 30 meters. So that means this entire height over here should be 30 as well, right? Between anything that makes up that height. So in this case, because 20 of those meters are here, that means this side here has to add up to 30 with the 20 that's there. Right, so what that means is this side is 10. And that means any other side that has that mark on it is 10 as well, right? We've got a bunch of 10s to add to our diagram. And then we're almost ready to add them all up. The only side that we don't know is this one along here. But what we can see along the top, the very, very full length of this shape is 30 and 20, so the whole thing is 50. So if I'm looking at the bottom, right, this and this and this, if I add them up, should go the full length of the shape, so they should add up to 50. So I've got a 20 here, a 10 there, which means I've got a 20 as well. Okay, once I've got them all labeled, I can essentially add them up. So I can go 20 plus 30 plus 30 plus 10 plus 20 plus 20 plus 10 plus 10 plus 20 plus 10, and the total ends up being 180 meters. All right, so just have a good close look at your diagrams, try and fill in every side. Don't assume that something looks like a certain length, so it is. Make sure you're actually using some logic in justifying uh, the lengths of the missing sides, and you'll get them right. All right, so moving on to area. Today we're only dealing with rectangles and triangles, making sure you guys remember the formulas for them and kind of understanding why they work. So area is introduced to you back in primary school kind of by just covering your shape with a grid and covering them with squares and counting those squares up. Obviously we're in year 9 now, so we don't do that anymore. We've gotten better than that. All right, we know shortcuts for our formulas. So we should be able to look at this rectangle and just know that the answer is 40, right? I've got a 10, I've got a 4, and most of us know how to turn a 10 and a 4 into a 40 using maths, right? So we're basically saying that this rectangle is filled with 40 square centimeters, right? 40 squares, and those squares are all centimeter sized, right? That's our unit of measurement there, right? If we had to do it the old way, you'd start drawing a grid on your thing, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Grid going that way, grid going that way, and you'd end up with 40 squares on there eventually, all of the same size. But what we should know is that we can just go 4 times 10, the length times the width to make 40 centimeters. Then the same thing kind of happens for triangles, right? So again, I've got similar measurements. I've got a 4 here and I've got a 10 there, but the answer is not 40, right? A lot of people just like to see two numbers and times two numbers together throughout this entire unit of area. If I give you two numbers, people are just going to want to times them together and move on. But the answer to a triangle isn't 40. In this case, it's 20. And the reason for that is that any triangle fits inside a rectangle, right? And fills up half of it. So basically, this triangle is half of the rectangle around it. So if you know how far across it is and how tall it is, you times those two numbers together and you just halve it, right? You're just really going 4 times 10 and then just dividing it by 2. Okay, because that is the formula, right? So here are the actual formulas written out for you. It's just always kind of good to know how they work, right? Knowing that a triangle is half of a rectangle, that's why there's a divided by 2 in it, right? As long as you remember a triangle is half of a rectangle, you'll probably remember to divide by 2 once you times a couple of numbers together, right? But all we've got to do for a rectangle with its length and its width is multiply them together, and all we've got to do with a triangle is multiply the base times the height and divide by 2, right? So when we talk about a base, that just means it's a side that your triangle can sit flat on and you know how tall it is. Okay, so some people get tricked, right? Your questions are going to look like this, a couple of them in your book, and people don't like them because their triangles aren't sitting flat on the ground, so they can't see how tall their triangles are. But you just have to imagine, I guess, that your piece of paper's been rotated or your triangle's been rotated, right? We should be able to just spin this around and sit it there on its base, right? And all you've got to know about a triangle is how far across it is on the bottom if it was sitting flat, and then how tall it is. And as long as you've got that, we can apply the formula, right? So the formula is that area is the base times the height divided by 2. It's always good to write your formula out because then you'll actually memorize it at some point. People forget them from year to year because they just don't write them down. So in this particular case, the base was 9, the height was 18. You divide by 2, and you can type that into your calculator now. The answer will be 81, and you need to make sure you put your units in. So because this was in centimeters and that's in centimeters, my answer is in centimeters squared because it's area, right? When we did perimeter, it was just centimeters or meters. These are square measurements because we're doing area. So same thing for this one. Always write your formula out to start with to show you understand it. We're going base times height divided by 2. That'll give me the area of the inside. So in this case, the base is 42 and the height is 20. Times them together, divide by 2, and you'll get 420. And these are in millimeters, so the answer's in millimeters squared, right? Okay, so that's the main thing you've got to take out of today. For the perimeter, just add up all the outside. And then for the area of these two particular shapes, for the rectangle, just times the two numbers together. No worries there, that'll give you the answer. And for your triangle, times the base by the height, and just don't forget to divide by 2, because if you don't divide by 2, you've really just found the area of a rectangle, right? So divide by 2, and you've split it up into a triangle, and you'll have your answer, all right? So there'll be a few questions for you on Google Classroom. There'll be a bit to do on Mathletics as well. So hopefully you'll get through it without too many worries.